Welcome to Dream Carriage. I'm so glad you're here tonight, ready to set aside the weight of the day and drift with me into a story told slowly, softly, and always with your rest in mind. This channel is your quiet carriage into dreams, a gentle space where each tale becomes a companion for peace, a ritual to guide you towards sleep. If this is your first time visiting, I warmly invite you to press subscribe so that each night a new story will be waiting for you. Like a lantern lit in the dusk, a familiar glow to guide you home to rest. Tonight's journey will carry us into a tale you may already know, though here it will unfold with a different rhythm, the timeless story of beauty and the gentle beast. Not a tale of fear or peril, but of calm discovery, of trust that grows like roses, blooming even in the quiet of winter. We begin in a small village at the edge of green hills, where Belle lived with her father. She was known for her love of books, often found with one open in her hands while the world moved gently around her. Her days were not hurried. They were shaped by market mornings, the scent of bread cooling on windowsills, and evenings when the sky folded itself softly into twilight. Belle's heart sought wonder, but she carried it quietly, like a secret she tended with care. It is from this stillness that her story begins, and as we walk with her into forests, through gates of ivy, and into the halls of a hidden castle, we will find not danger, but a gentler magic, one that invites rest, safety, and peace. Before we follow Belle further into her story, let us pause for a moment, allowing the body to settle into its own quiet rhythm. Take a slow, gentle breath in through your nose. Feel the air arrive cool and calming, filling your lungs. Hold it lightly for a heartbeat, and then exhale, longer than the inhale, letting the day dissolve with the breath. Again, inhale slowly, softly, and as you breathe out, let your shoulders sink lower, as though they have finally placed down what they've carried. Now, bring your awareness to the crown of your head. Imagine a wave of ease flowing gently across your scalp, smoothing thoughts, softening the mind. With your next breath, this calm drifts down your forehead, relaxing the muscles around your eyes. Your eyelids grow heavier, comfortable, as though night itself is holding them. Let your jaw unclench, lips part slightly, tongue resting easily. Your face feels open, gentle. Your shoulders sink deeper, no longer holding the hours of the day. Your arms grow warm and heavy, resting safely at your sides. Your hands relax, fingers loose, each one soft and still. Notice your chest, rising and falling in a rhythm, steady as the turn of a page. Beneath it, your belly loosens, quiet and free. Allow this sense of ease to travel down through your hips, thighs, knees, and calves. Each exhale releases them further, until even your feet grow heavy, steady, as if rooted in earth, both safe and kind. Around you, imagine the hush of a village evening, the faint creak of shutters being drawn closed, the faraway sound of a stream carrying the moon in its current, the scent of woodsmoke rising gently into the cool night. Everything unhurried, everything softened. With every breath, you are already entering Belle's world, ready to walk slowly into the quiet beauty of her tale. The village where Belle lived was small, but it carried the kind of quiet charm that lingers in memory. Narrow cobblestone lanes curved between houses with shutters painted in soft blues and greens, their wood smoothed by years of use. Window boxes overflowed with geraniums, their petals glowing faintly even in the dimming light. From one home came the smell of fresh bread cooling on a sill, and from another the faint sweetness of honey warming in a jar. In the marketplace, baskets still rested on wooden stalls, though the vendors had long gone home. Apples gleamed under the lantern light, their red skins polished like glass. A few cabbages, a loaf of rye, and a bouquet of wild flowers lay forgotten, left behind as if waiting for someone who had wandered too far into conversation to return. The fountain at the square's center trickled steadily, its water catching the last violet shades of dusk. Belle often walked here in the evenings, a book tucked under her arm. Her father would sometimes be found outside their cottage, bent over a workbench, shaping small wooden gears or mending a clock with patient hands. The scent of wood shavings followed him like a quiet badge of his craft. Their home was simple, but its door was always warm, its hearth always alive with a low, comforting fire. Beyond the village, the fields stretched outward, golden stubble glowing faintly beneath the rising moon. The line of the forest stood dark and steady at the horizon, its trees forming a wall that both protected and concealed. Stories were told of what lay within, ruins of old castles, gardens where roses grew even under snow, and whispers of enchantments left behind. This was the world Belle knew, one of steady rhythms, of ordinary beauty, of evenings folded into stillness. She did not seek adventure, but she held it quietly in her heart, the way one holds a lantern unlit, knowing someday it may be needed, and soon the path of her story would lead her beyond the forest's edge, into a castle that seemed forgotten by time, and into the presence of a gentle soul who waited there in silence. The story turns on a quiet evening when Belle's father, on his way home from a distant fair, lost his path in the woods. The sky had grown heavy with clouds, and the lantern in his hand cast only a trembling circle of light on the damp earth. The forest was dense and still, its branches arching overhead like the ribs of some ancient cathedral. At last, through the shifting mist, he came upon iron gates overgrown with ivy. They stood slightly ajar, as though time itself had forgotten to close them. Beyond lay a castle, its towers softened by age, its windows glowing with an amber light that seemed more invitation than warning. He stepped through the gates, drawn by the promise of warmth, and walked slowly across a courtyard where roses bloomed despite the season, petals red as embers, stems tipped with frost yet alive, as if nourished by some quiet magic. Inside, the great hall was vast, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows, its stone walls softened by tapestries that whispered with the draught. A fire burned low in the hearth, its flame steady and kind. Beside it, a chair had been placed, as though expecting a weary traveler. Gratefully, Belle's father sat, his chilled hands thawing in the glow. It was then that the beast appeared, not with thunder, not with fury, but with presence alone. His steps were deliberate but unthreatening, his form tall, cloaked in shadows. The air shifted as he entered, yet the flame in the hearth did not waver. His voice, when it came, was deep, but not unkind. "You are welcome," he said simply, no demand, No threat, only the words, shaped like a gift. And though fear trembled faintly in Belle's father, it was eased by the calm with which the beast regarded him. There was no chase, no chain, only a quiet invitation to stay, to rest. When Belle's father returned to the village and told his daughter what had passed, she saw not menace in his eyes, but weariness and the faint trace of awe. He spoke of the castle where roses bloomed through winter, of halls warmed by fires, though no servant stirred, and of the beast whose presence filled the space with quiet power. He feared what might come of the hospitality, but Belle listened differently. She heard in his words not a curse, but a calling, and so she chose, with calm resolve, to go in his place. On the morning of her departure, she pressed a book gently into her satchel, knowing its pages would be her companion. She kissed her father's brow, whispered that he should not worry, and set off toward the forest. The woods greeted her with stillness, branches arching like a vaulted passage, the path strewn with moss and pine needles. The lantern she carried made a golden pool around her, each step sinking her deeper into the hush. Soon the gates appeared, ivy clinging like memory to their iron bars. They opened easily, as though they had been waiting for her alone. The castle welcomed her in silence. She crossed the courtyard, where roses glowed red against the frost, their scent carrying the sweetness of summer into winter's breath. Inside, the same fire burned, steady in the hearth, the same chair empty, waiting. And again, he appeared. The beast entered not with roar or rage, but with gravity, a figure cloaked in shadows yet softened by the amber light. His gaze lingered on her, but not with hunger, not with threat, rather with wonder, perhaps even relief, as though her presence had lifted something he had carried for too long. When he spoke, his voice rolled low, resonant, yet gentle. "You are welcome here." The words, simple as they were, rang through the hall like a promise. Belle felt no need to answer at once. Instead, she bowed her head slightly, acknowledging not just the greeting, but the strange sense of safety within it. And so her story in the castle began, not with fear, but with quiet acceptance. The days within the castle unfolded slowly, like the turning of pages in a cherished book. At first, Belle wandered the great halls, her footsteps softened by carpets woven long ago. The walls, though built of stone, carried no chill. Tapestries bloomed with scenes of forests and rivers, their threads still bright with color. In the courtyard, roses opened in defiance of the season, their petals heavy with dew, as if warmed by some secret sun hidden deep within the earth. The beast kept his distance in those early days. He was often near, but never imposing, his presence like the steady flame of a lantern in the corner of a darkened room. At dinner, he would sit across the long table, his hands folded, his voice a rumble that carried not command, but curiosity. "What did you read today?" he would ask, and Belle would answer, speaking of stories filled with wonder, of faraway places, of characters who found courage in the quietest moments. Sometimes she would read aloud to him, her voice carried gently across the hall, and when she glanced up, she would find him listening, not with the sharpness of an animal, but with the stillness of one who has learned patience. Evenings often found them by the fire, the logs crackling softly, sparks rising and vanishing into the chimney. Belle would sit with a book open, the beast resting in a great chair carved from oak. He would close his eyes sometimes, and she noticed that the harsh lines of his face seemed to soften in the glow. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of trust growing slowly, of companionship unspoken, of the comfort that comes when nothing more is required than to simply be. And in that silence, Belle began to feel what she had not expected in the castle: peace. One evening, the beast led Belle down a corridor she had not yet explored. The walls rose high, lined with tall windows where moonlight spilled in silver pools. At the end of the hall, a pair of doors stood waiting, carved with vines and blossoms. He pushed them open slowly, and beyond lay a chamber so vast it took her breath away. It was a library, shelves soaring from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes bound in leather, parchment, and cloth. Ladders leaned against the walls, waiting patiently, and globes rested in corners, their surfaces etched with seas and lands from another time. The air smelled of paper and ink, but also of possibility. Belle stepped inside, her fingers brushing the spines of books, as though greeting old friends. She turned to the beast, eyes shining, and in that moment, he seemed less like a figure of shadow and more like a keeper of light. "This is yours," he said, his voice steady, quiet. "All of it." The gift was not meant to impress. It was an offering of companionship, an acknowledgement of who she was, of what she loved. And in the warmth of that gesture, something within Belle softened further. She realized she was not merely a guest here. She was seen, understood, and perhaps even cherished. From then on, the days grew gentler still. She read aloud from those shelves, her voice mingling with the crackle of the fire. They walked the gardens together, roses opening like quiet smiles at their passing. Sometimes he would speak of the castle's history, his tone not bitter, but touched with longing. Other times they sat without words, watching the stars wheel above the ivy-clad towers. The bond between them unfolded without haste. It was not marked by sudden declarations or storm of emotion, but by the steady weaving of shared silences and the quiet recognition that kindness given and returned is its own form of enchantment. And as Belle grew to know the beast, she began to feel less the weight of his form and more the gentleness of his heart. Time within the castle did not move as it did in the world beyond. Days folded seamlessly into nights, each one leaving behind a thread of quiet closeness between Belle and the beast. What began as cautious presence had softened into companionship, and companionship into trust. On a winter's evening, when snow pressed softly against the castle windows and the fire in the hearth glowed steady, Belle looked across at him. The beast was seated near the flames, his massive frame curved slightly, his claws resting gently on the arm of the chair. Yet in his stillness, there was no menace, only weariness, and beneath it, something like hope. She reached out her hand. It hovered for a moment, then rested upon his. His fur was coarse at first touch, but beneath it, warmth flowed steady, as real and human as her own. He looked at her with eyes that seemed surprised, not by her touch, but by her willingness to give it freely. And in that instant, something shifted, not loudly, but with the gentleness of a petal falling. The beast did not change. At once, there was no thunder, no crack of lightning. Instead, It was as though layers of shadow slipped away. His form softened, his features refined, until at last before her stood not a monster, but a man, eyes still the same, filled with quiet longing, but now uncovered, revealed. Belle saw in him not the drama of transformation, but the truth that had been there all along. That kindness and gentleness had always been his deepest nature, and she smiled, not because of the magic that had lifted, but because she had known it already. The castle seemed to breathe in relief, its halls warming, its roses blooming brighter. Yet the greatest change was not in walls or gardens, but in the quiet understanding that love, slow, tender, and true, had taken root. And so the story of Beauty and the Gentle Beast became less about breaking spells and more about discovering what had been waiting patiently all along. The castle grew gentler in its silence, as though the very stones were exhaling. Candles glowed lower, their light swaying softly against the carved walls. In the courtyard, roses bowed their heads beneath the silver wash of moonlight, petals trembling like breaths in sleep. Belle and her gentle companion walked slowly along the garden path. The air was cool, scented faintly with frost and the lingering sweetness of blossoms that defied winter. Their footsteps were unhurried, each one softened by moss and fallen leaves. Above them, the stars shimmered in quiet procession, and the great arc of the Milky Way stretched like a river of light over the castle towers. When they returned inside, the fire in the hearth welcomed them with its last steady warmth. Belle laid her shawl aside and drew closer, feeling the peace of the evening settle into her body like a lullaby. The beast, now no longer a beast but a man, sat nearby, his gaze calm, his presence steady, as though promising she would never need to be alone again. Later, Belle prepared for sleep. She spread a quilt across the bed, its fabric soft and fragrant with lavender. The room was quiet, but not empty. Every detail seemed to breathe the safety. The drapes stirred lightly with the night air. The fire whispered low, and in that stillness, she felt herself carried, as if the castle itself were holding her gently. She closed her eyes, breath slowed. The rhythm of the night settled into her chest, in and out, as steady as the tide, as certain as morning's return. Thoughts loosened, like petals falling one by one, until only stillness remained. The stars above kept their vigil. The roses in the courtyard dreamed their red and silver dreams. And Belle, at last, drifted into the deep quiet of sleep, safe, cherished, and at peace.